So you know how in movies that revolve around somebody being possessed, The Exorcist, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, things like this. You know how in the beginning of it, everybody's thinking that there's just something slightly wrong with the person, like they have a cold or something like that. And they're like, no, she'll be fine, she'll be fine. But us as the audience knows, like, nah, that ain't right. Then once it gets into the full-on possession of the person, it's like, oh my God, they look like the devil himself. And then everybody's like, don't go in that room. She ain't right. She ain't right. Y'all, if that is not what Letecia Stauch looks like at this point, I am just like, oh my God. And now that we have had access to read the affidavit and see the absolute absurdities of her lies, the horror that poor Gannon went through. I mean, he was literally living with someone who is in the same spectrum of like a demon possession, in my personal opinion. But the scary part is that I think she was of totally sound mind and that she is just that evil. So I read the affidavit. I had to pick my mouth up several times in disbelief. And I basically want to talk about some of the key points that stick out to me. I'm not going to go through it word for word, line for line in this video, but I am going to speak to those parts that literally jumped out and was like across my face. At this point, some of the stuff in the affidavit we now know that wasn't in there. So just keep that in mind and just remember we're going to be speaking of what is in the affidavit. So let's jump into it. So let's talk about some of her past criminal convictions. Now in Robeson County, North Carolina, and may I say as a North Carolinian, we don't claim her. She was convicted by a jury of communicating threats. This is not shocking to us at this point. Now that was a misdemeanor. Now in a separate court case, she was convicted of unauthorized use of a vehicle, and she served 45 days and then like 18 months probation for that. Even more interesting was her teaching certificate being suspended. The board said that Letecia breached her contract by engaging in unprofessional behavior, willfully neglecting her duty, and failing to comply with the provisions of her contract. The reason I find her past interesting is because we can see a pattern developing with her. So let's jump into the timeline of events. Now the main timeline that's going to be discussed in this is Monday, January 27th, 2020 through Wednesday, January 29th, 2020. So January 27th, it says Letecia calls 911, that she's told to call the non-emergency line. This is when she's saying, Gannon's missing, he should have been home an hour ago. Now already the affidavit is painting this picture of really suspicious behavior. The affidavit is saying that Letecia claims that he went to a neighbor's house, but she's unable to say what neighbors, what friends, what parents of friends. All of this is like, what? Now, overall, the affidavit is citing this bizarre behavior by her, and we're going to get deeper into each of those. But just as an overview, we can see that her behavior is very, bizarre when she's getting a rental car, disconnecting her cell phone at times, the false reporting of an alleged attack against her abnormal travel patterns, and the never-ending stories that she seems to facilitate. Now, y'all, let's talk about the incident. Now, the affidavit says that investigators believe that Letecia did what she did to Gannon on January 27, 2020, in the house, specifically in his bedroom. Now, the physical evidence recovered from this, I was like, oh my God. It shows that a definite violent attack took place in his bedroom. Now there is splatter on the walls, there's enough fluid loss to soak his mattress, soak through the carpet pad, and stain the cement beneath his bed. Now they then think that his body was dragged through the house, through the garage, and then loaded into the Volkswagen. Now when I was reading that, it just makes it that much more real. And again, I cannot get the image of how psychotic she looks out of my mind and what that poor boy was going through in those final moments. Now it says that they believe that she got rid of his body like on the evening of the 28th off of Highway 105 South Perry Park Road. Now it also states that they were able to tie the fluid found in his room, garage, as well as fluid found on a particle board at the scene where they believe his body was first left. All of this DNA matched. So this starts to paint the picture of all the inconsistencies in the beginning that we were able to see that just didn't make sense. Everybody was like, what is going on? Her stories aren't adding up. How did this even happen? And then of course when we found out that he was found in Florida, this raised so many other questions. But a lot of people were kind of onto that because they're like, you know what? I bet she went and did this and then came back and moved the body and da. So the affidavit also talks about evidence showing that it does look like Gannon stayed home from school on the 27th. Now it shows that Letecia told Al that he had been up most of the night with a stomach bug and that she ended up staying home with him the next day. It looks like she did tell his school that he was going to be absent that day. Now another thing that's very bizarre and very telling of her character, of her nature, is how she went about handling calling out to work the next day to stay home with him. She called and said that her stepfather had been struck and killed by a car and that she couldn't come into work. And I'm just like, what? Like, why would you even think to make that up? It's the most bizarre lie. But also, I'm just like, isn't that something that people could check up on if they really wanted to? And isn't that something that people are going to really question you about? As opposed to, hi, I won't be able to make it in. I have explosive diarrhea. Most people are not going to want to know about that. So they'll just tell you not to come into work and to stay home. But if you call in saying that your stepfather was struck and killed by a car, you know when you go back, they're going to be like, oh my God, what happened? Where was it? It just doesn't make sense. But if we see her pattern of lying, it makes sense for her. Now, another thing that was interesting is the affidavit says that it looks like that surveillance we saw from the neighbor where Letecia leaves, they believe that he did come back with her. Like when they left the house in that red truck, they believe, yeah, you know what? We believe he was still alive and that he came back with her. Now, one of the siblings, Letecia, she comes home from school. In an interview, it says that Letecia said that Letecia was basically like, oh, Gannon's asleep on my bed, go outside and play. And they believe that at this point he, was no longer with us. Now it says later that Harley, the other sibling, arrives home and picks Letecia up, and then text evidence shows that Letecia sends Harley a message asking her for blatant cleaning products. Carpet cleaner, trash bags, baking soda. Obviously the authorities know what this stuff is going to be used for. Now also interesting is that the affidavit says that Harley refused to speak with investigators, but that they did confirm that she was not at the home during the time that they believe this happened. So let's talk about the car rental. So Letecia rents his Kia Rio on the morning of the 28th. Soon thereafter, she picks Al up from the airport and they go home. Now the affidavit reports that her Volkswagen was fine. It wasn't broken. There's nothing wrong with it. There's literally no reason, other than the obvious, to have rented this Kia. Now the affidavit alleges that she told Al that she was worried about the mileage on the Volkswagen, and so that's why she rented the Kia. It also says that Al never saw the Volkswagen and that she said it was parked at the elementary school, but it looks like it was actually parked at the short-term parking at the airport. Now the investigators are saying she most likely didn't want Al seeing this because there would have been obvious signs of what took place, or possibly even Gannon himself still in the car. She returned the rental car on the 29th and was most likely picked up by Harley. Now investigators say they believe that she used the Volkswagen to dump Gannon on the evening of the 28th. Now the Volkswagen was taken into custody on the 29th and it had been washed immediately prior to being turned in, or when they took it from her. Now here's the next part. The forensic search on the car. They found traces of fluid basically all over it. On the rear of the vehicle, on the rear passenger seat, on the front passenger seat, an area near the glove box, the rear bumper, the step plate of the rear bumper. Fluid was also found on the floor in the garage where the car would have backed up to. So again, here's the thing with this car evidence. Before we even get to the blatant evidence all over the car, let's look at the aspect of her renting a car. Now clearly she is like trying to figure out what to do. She has to go get Al, she knows what she did, but she's fumbling. Why in God's name would you rent a car without telling your partner and say you were worried about the miles, and then them not ever see that car? And you being like, oh, it's parked at work or whatever. That is so bizarre. And again, it's just this level of why would you even think that wouldn't raise a red flag to somebody? I mean, why would you even think that? Let's not even get into the fact that she dragged this poor boy through the house into the car and left his DNA all over the damn place. Let's talk about her interview. Y'all, they had 3 words for this interview: untruthful, incomplete, and misleading. Y'all, she brought notes to the interview and asked to reference them all throughout. Right there, I would have been like, Get some damn cuffs on her. Don't even waste my damn time with that one. Send her off. Walk her ass on down to the jail cell, block 8. Y'all, and it even says in there, like, I don't know the exact wording. I don't have it in front of me right now. But, essentially, in all my time of interviewing suspects, I've never had one bring notes and ask to reference them. I mean, this is so obvious. This is the delusional part of her. This is the entitlement, the I am smarter than you, the I deserve to get away with what I'm doing attitude that she's had all throughout this. Now, y'all, this leads us into the next little jewel by Letecia. She changed her story once again, and this one's a doozy. She said that she had been held up at gunpoint by a guy named Eduardo and violated in a manner that men do to women sometimes. Not only that, she then tries to back up the story with facts of how they arrived in that situation. And literally, I'm like, I had secondhand embarrassment reading it, because I was like, I can't even look myself in the eyes after reading this. How did she even think for 1 second that somebody would believe this absolutely idiotic story? She says she gets home, she disarms the alarm, and this guy is waiting for her in the basement. He attacks her. He pulls a gun on her. After he does this, he allows her to go upstairs to greet her stepdaughter, Lania, who had arrived home from school, and she essentially gets Lania to get out of the house and like go ride a bike or something. After that, she returns downstairs to Eduardo, at which point he violates her. We'll talk about my thoughts on that whole thing in just a minute. Conveniently, she thinks she hit her head during that violation and can't remember anything. Of course, the investigators found no head trauma other than the mental issues that are going on. Now, she says during this violation, Gannon jumped on Eduardo's back, but that Eduardo threw Gannon off of him. Now, after this, he allegedly holds Gannon at gunpoint too, and then he asks him for a brown suitcase. So Letecia gets the brown suitcase, she gets a piece of cardboard. How convenient that that will come back up later. She says then Eduardo went for round 2 with her, and she hit her head and blacked out. Y'all, let's just pause for 1 second. I'm sorry. What kind of a damn fool do you think the public is, number one, but then also the investigators? I mean, honestly, if there is a charge for being a damn jackass, I hope she gets first degree. Why in heaven's name would you tell the investigators that he was in the basement, he sent you upstairs to greet your daughter, and that you just willingly went back down there? It doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even make sense. And then notice how she slides in all this little stuff that only the person involved in this would know, which these investigators say in the affidavit towards the end. The cardboard, the brown suitcase. So she's sprinkling the stuff trying to cover her tracks. This is how we know that she is pure evil, because she 100% knows that what she did is wrong. She doesn't feel bad about it. She just wants to make sure she doesn't get held accountable for it. Another interesting thing is that she declined to talk to a nurse examiner, who they specialize in doing things like this when someone's been violated in this way. And so she declined that. Of course she did, because none of it's true. Now, even more of a farce is that how she met this Eduardo guy. It couldn't just be someone random. She had to make up another lie, because she keeps backing herself into a corner. So she's like, oh, actually, Gannon had spilt a candle and burnt the carpet a little bit, and so I had to go drive around the neighborhood and find one of the contractor type people that was doing some residential remodeling, and he said he would come and fix it, so I gave him the garage code. Now, just that right there, I'm like, again, how stupid do you think people are? And I do think that she thinks that everyone is that stupid. I really do, because she's that stupid. So she assumes that everyone else is on her level of stupid. However, luckily the investigators say a simple search of her cell phone records and the ADT records showed that while this horrible violation was going on, the upstairs doors were being opened and closed and cell phone things were being done. So she must have been very busy while this was taking place. Now, also during the interview with the investigators, she starts to kind of feign like some kind of, I'm guessing, a panic attack, a heart attack, something like that. Yo, when all else fails for these people, it's like all they can do is drop to the floor and hold their their heart. I'm not saying that's exactly what she did, but I mean, that's literally all they can do. And so, of course, they're like, oh my God, okay, we have to dot our I's and cross our T's. So, they cart her off to the damn hospital. And they're like, miraculously, she was much better when we got there. Nonetheless, she's not wanting to answer questions and things like that at that point. Now, here's my thing. I find it odd that she was free as long as she was. I mean, literally reading this, you're just like, why wasn't she locked up immediately? I get that they wanted to secure the evidence. You know what I'm saying? Like, make sure they got it. But from the get-go, it is so obvious that she's involved. You're just like, how did she even get to ever leave the station or the hospital? Because she did leave the hospital. Let's talk about that peculiar thing called Google. Y'all, God help all of us that are involved in true crime and those who aren't. If any of our Google searches were looked up just random, I mean, we could all probably say, what in the hey diddle diddle is this person doing? I'm frightened, I'm scared, I think I just wet my pants. That being said, Letecia's are very telling. So let's just start with the internet activity between the 25th and the 28th. She's looking at rental properties in Florida, she's looking for employment outside of Colorado, and she's looking at like a moving calculator. I find all this interesting since we know the location where Gannon was ultimately found. So let's talk specifically about the Google searches that the investigators are putting in this affidavit, because it also to me really shows how much pre-planning or afterthought planning she was doing. So she searched for, can Nintendo find my Switch? Now apparently Gannon had a Switch. A Nintendo Switch, if you don't know, is like this little gaming system or whatever, and you can carry it around and do all this stuff. And so Gannon had one, and like any young boy, I mean, I got that when his dad was like, it's really special to him. I mean, trust me, I was there once. And so it looks like basically what she was doing was trying to use that as like a ploy of, oh, he ran away or it's missing or whatever. It looks like she was definitely trying to make it look like, well, if I get rid of the Switch, is the Nintendo going to be able to locate it? Like, does it have a tracker on it, essentially? Another interesting search was actually made from Gannon's phone. Can my parents find my cell phone if it's turned off? Now, the investigators say they believe that this was Letecia making this search from his phone. So, mark my words, y'all. When she tries to roll out with some kind of insanity defense in about 2 years or so, let's just remember this stuff right here, y'all, because she knew exactly what she was doing. Now, y'all, overall, these searches, they just show somebody who wasn't happy being a stepmother, who felt like she had the world on her shoulders and that the world owed her. And I'm just going to read a few of them off because when I was reading these, I was like, what? Like, this is so bad. So the first one is find real military singles. And side note, I'm sorry, but she was cheating on him. I often contemplated the Eduardo thing. I'm just like, she might have just been driving around the neighborhood and went and hooked up with some dude, to try and cover her tracks and get the DNA to prove it. See what I'm saying? Like, for the violation. Now, also what's interesting, and I'm going to read a few of these in succession, is these searches that she does about being a step-parent. Parenting should be 4 people, not 1. Another one. I'm overdoing all the work for my stepkids and their mom doesn't help. Another one. Mom advice from stepmom. Another one. My husband's ex-wife does nothing for her kids. Another one. One day some people will wish they treated you differently. Another one. Find a guy who wants me to take care of his kids and get paid. I mean, y'all, this girl was looking for a free ride here. I forget what they call those type girls or women or whatever that live around like military areas that kind of like look to get hooked up with military dudes to get their paycheck. I don't know the term of it or whatever, but I just felt like she had this written all over her. Now, more telling with these Google searches, of course, is when you can almost see the timeline of what happens when Gannon is technically, missing, allegedly. So more searches are, what is the process for our runaway child? Police steps for our missing child. Can Nintendo find my Switch? They are asking for our son's toothbrush but said nothing is wrong. I mean, how many people have searched that? Why would you even search that? I mean, my God. I can understand and I can get, Google is almost like our private thing, so a lot of our private thoughts are in there. If she's wanted to cheat, whatever, okay, you know what I mean? But you're getting into this whole aspect of you've done this crime. And so now you're like Googling things that you should have known at this point not to get anywhere near Google with these questions. Now, she also has deleted phone searches, and these are very telling to say the least. Find me a new husband book. I feel like I'm just a nanny, not a stepmom. Y'all, these almost could read like a really bizarre game of Jeopardy. Find me a new husband book for $200, Alex. I feel like I'm just a nanny, not a stepmom, for $300. Husband uses me to babysit his kids. Are there any free money to move away from bad situation? For $200. And as an additional note, poor grammatical skills during Google searches for $800, Alex. Now, y'all, these go on, and it just looks really bad. Clearly, she was not happy with this dude. She was not happy being a step-parent. So my whole thing is this, it always comes down to this. Why are you staying in this situation? Was she tied to it monetarily? I mean, if she was this miserable, then go. So the affidavit outlines Letecia's consciousness of guilt. She rents the vehicle, turns the cell phone off for several hours on the evening of the 28th, washes the Volkswagen immediately before going to the police interview, evades a deeper, in-depth interview. And I think we all remember this public gem. She doesn't assist in looking for Gannon. The affidavit outlines her level of paranoia. So after that whole search she did of their asking for her kid's toothbrush, she contacts Alan, is essentially saying, like, I think they're hiding something, the cops. Now that's bizarre enough as it is. I mean, why would they be hiding something from you? But Letecia finds a way to make it even worse. She sends this paranoid text to one of the investigators, and at that point, you know the investigators were just showing this to each other like, dudes, I mean, when can we go arrest this woman? You know, I mean, she obviously did this. I mean, this text just reeks of conspiracy theorist type stuff. What do you want from me? Because I have nothing. One of your very own leaked to me what you guys were doing. I did nothing and or am being set up. I'm not really even sure other than being told that by another blue with El Paso. I was told I couldn't go home to sleep, and on top of that, men were sent to a home with a minor female, and she was forced to stay there, not to even leave for food. Every conversation that said, even at this moment I can hear inside, what do you want from me? I absolutely love the detective's response. Come in to talk to me. I would just like information to find Gannon. I mean, y'all, hasn't she done this? She has gaslighted this whole time, trying to point out to everybody what they're doing wrong. This whole time, knowing the horrific things that she has done to this poor boy. Now, even more interesting is that they say that once her car was seized, she rents an Altima, and they put a tracker on that, and that it shows that she went back to the original drop site for where Gannon was. Now, they believe she did this so she could go in daylight, just to make sure, like, okay, let's make sure that nothing's visible, and so on and so forth. Now, the affidavit goes over basically all the different stories that she comes up with. Story number 1. When EPSO came to the house on January 27th, the abductor was still in her residence. She tried to signal to the deputies that there was someone in her residence, although they note that no one was in the house when they searched the house. Story number 2. She was violated by Quincy Brown at her residence, and Brown abducted Gannon. She knew Brown's identity because she saw a paper and his identification card fall out of his pocket that had his name on it. She sent a photograph of Quincy Brown to Mr. Stauch via text message. It's convenient that Quincy Brown was on the most wanted list, so clearly she went to this list and found somebody who kind of did something like this and was on the lam or whatever, and tried to totally play it off on him. I also love how she went Jodi Arias. Remember when Jodi was like, the ninjas came in and they asked for her identification? And like, who does that? You know what I'm saying? So this guy was, nice enough to leave some, identifying paperwork out during all of the scruffle that she was able to find. Story number 3. Quincy Brown followed her from Petco and at some point was laying in the middle of the road in front of her car. When she stopped to avoid running the man over, he jumped into her car and made her take him home, then violated her. Y'all, I mean, it doesn't even make sense. This is some Diane Downs BS right here. Story number 4. Letecia and Gannon were near County Line Road Highway 105 in northern El Paso County on the 27th. Gannon was riding a bicycle in that area and fell off, hit his head, and was then abducted by Quincy Brown. In this version of events, Quincy Brown was driven by a man named Terrence. Well, now, wasn't that a terrible day for everybody? But again, notice how in this, she is trying to connect the dots. She is trying to take bits of truth that she knows she did and connect them to these other people. Now, another aspect that she did, and we can remember some of this seen on TV or in her interviews was trying to connect the dots for everybody about fluids found in places like in the garage, saying, well, Al has tools out there, of course there's going to be stuff out there, and then she even told Al at one point that, oh look, well, Ganny, burnt himself with a candle and it bubbled up, and he tore his, he messed with the scar and then rubbed that on the wall, and that's how the splatter and stuff got there. So again, to someone listening to this, it's like, okay, to the investigators, and when they say this in the affidavit, it's like, okay, well, she knows all this stuff about how this attack happened. So it's very clear to them what's going on. Now, y'all, this little video on Letecia Stauch wouldn't be complete without talking about a fake polygraph test. Yeah, this one took the damn cake. I was like, I didn't even know this is a thing. I didn't even know it was the thing. I mean, and at this point, I'm like, I'm sure a lot of Jerry Springer contestants or guests, whatever you call them, know it's a thing. So she went to the lengths of getting a fake polygraph test. Now, when she didn't get the results, she's like, I'm entitled to these results. Where are these results? And so she calls him, and the guy's like, yeah, we reserve the right to not release these when it's like obviously about some serious crimes. Y'all, when I read the questions, I had to pick my damn mouth up off the floor. I was like, who would even think to do this? The fake questions that she made up are as follows. Did you participate in any way in causing harm to your stepson? Did your stepson return with you to your home? Did you participate in any way in causing the end of your stepson? I mean, y'all, come on. And no, anybody would know that you don't send that off somewhere. I mean, are you kidding me? So, y'all, overall reading this, honestly, my blood pressure was like through the roof. I was just like, you have got to be kidding me. Part of me wonders, why didn't they arrest her sooner? I guess they wanted to, find Gannon and do all that. But reading this, I was like, this is very frustrating because it's obvious right from the get-go that she is so guilty. Y'all, there's really no way out of this. Now, I personally think she will go to trial because she's just that kind of a vile human being. And I think she's going to put everyone around her through as much misery as she can. She clearly hated this family, and she had a lot of resentment. If you look up Bitter Party of One, her picture is next to it. And she is going to drag everyone she can down into this disgusting little world known as Letecia. So if you're still here watching, thanks for hanging with me. This is a long video. What do you think? Please drop in the comments. What do you think of the affidavit? Is there anything that jumped out to you? What do you think is going to happen from here? Do you think she'll go to trial? Do you think she'll plead insanity? Let me know. I hope everyone's staying safe and at home and well and healthy. And I'll talk to you soon.